Takeru was a virgin loser who had never touched a girl. However, his life takes an unexpected turn when he enrolls in an all-girls school to increase his chances of clapping, but ends up living with a group of 10 out of 10 baddies who will fight each other to decide who will be the first to swipe his V-card. It all began on the first day of school, when Takeru's childhood friend and vice president of the student council, Haruko, decides to pick him up personally. She hasn't seen him in years and recalls fond memories from when they used to be kids. Haruko imagines he must have matured, grown taller, and become more responsible. But as soon as she opens the door, she walks in to see Takeru barely dressed and still fumbling with his clothes like a drunkard. Taken aback, Haruko clumsily sends a stack of boxes toppling onto her, and in his desperate attempt to shield her, Takeru's hand ends up in a no-fly zone. Haruko smacks him for the accident, but she's also happy to finally meet him after such a long time. On the way to school, Takeru admits he chose Tenbi Academy because it was now co-ed and didn't require entrance exams, proving once again that his academic standards are as low as his common sense. He's thrilled at the thought of finally having a rose-colored high school life surrounded by girls, but Haruko is furious he came here for just that. Nonetheless, she gives him a warm welcome and advises him not to get into trouble on his first day. Upon reaching the academy, it quickly becomes clear that the boys are severely outnumbered, with hundreds of beautiful girls around. Takeru soon finds himself in the middle of a full-blown battle between two second-year girls, Kongo and Azuki, who seem to be fighting over a mere teddy bear. They are using superpowers to strike one another, leaving Takeru stunned. As he tries to understand what's going on, he barely notices a girl watching from a tree above like a cheap Spider-Man copy. This is Himakami, a mysterious student who's accompanied by her unseen spirit. When Azuki's attack hits the tree branch, Himakami falls straight onto Takeru, accidentally kissing him in the process. Furious and embarrassed, she prepares to strike him like he just insulted her ancestors, but stops when she notices a strange mark on Takeru's chest. Her expression quickly changes, and she whispers that she has finally found her enemy. Unaware of the meaning behind the mark or Himakami's cryptic drama, Takeru rushes off to the gym for the entrance ceremony. Soon after, Principal Minori welcomes the new students and casually reveals that this school is not normal, as everyone will now wield elemental powers through special weapons called Maken. Those who can master their Maken and control their element will achieve great things in life. Takeru is lost in the explanation, looking more confused than a goldfish at a chess tournament. To demonstrate, the principal calls on the same two girls from earlier, Kongo and Azuki, to show off their skills, but they end up teasing each other more than fighting. To move things along, Himakami volunteers for the demonstration, and shockingly requests Takeru as her opponent. She considers him enemy number one, and wants to hand him a solid backside whooping. Despite Haruko's protests, the principal agrees, and the crowd encourages the reluctant Takeru to take the stage like they're about to witness a public execution. Himakami tells him it will only be a pretend match, and all he needs to do is show off a few martial arts moves. Takeru happily agrees, and he starts by showing off some pathetic moves, but then all of a sudden Himakami unleashes her thunder element to eliminate him for good. Just as Haruko prepares to intervene, a mysterious girl suddenly appears and blocks the attack with a powerful strike of her own. Everyone is stunned when the principal identifies her weapon as one of the 8 legendary Makens. The girl collapses but quickly recovers in Takeru's arms, joyfully hugging him like they're long-lost soulmates. She introduces herself as Anasu and then shockingly declares that she's Takeru's fiancé and will protect him from now on. Haruko is furious, demanding to know how she knows Takeru, but the girl simply kisses him in front of the entire school. This leaves the simp Takeru crying tears of happiness while Haruko explodes with fury. Later that evening, Haruko visits Takeru's dorm to get answers, only to find Inoho already there. It turns out the principal approved them to share the room, claiming it was too big for one person. Haruko is furious by the setup and insists it's improper for a boy and girl to share a room. But before she can finish her rant, Himakami appears from the back of the room with her things in hand, declaring she'll also be living there from now on. Shocked and overwhelmed, Haruko demands an explanation, and Aho says it's necessary to stay close to Takeru to protect him, like a loyal puppy, while Himakami claims she needs to monitor him for personal reasons. Haruko angrily storms out of the room, only to return a few moments later with all of her belongings. She declares that, as the dorm's superintendent, it's her duty to make sure nothing happens between the boys and girls. Takeru doesn't even object, as just a few days ago, he was living like a celibate monk, but now he's getting unlimited gravy. The only problem now is that there's just 3 beds, so one of them will have to sleep on the floor. Later that night, Haruko awakens from her sleep as it turns out she was the one sent to the floor. She immediately climbs up to check on Takeru's bed, only to realize he's been sleeping with Inoho. Feeling betrayed and furious, Haruko flattens his face before going back to sleep. The next morning, Takeru wakes up feeling like he survived 10 rounds with a sumo wrestler. Haruko quickly hands him an ice pack, clearly feeling guilty about what happened earlier. She also warns Inoho not to behave like that again, but Inoho claims she only slept with him out of concern. Takeru leaves the room and heads to the bathroom, only to walk in on Himakami, who's in the middle of a changing session. Furious that he's creeping on her, she zaps him like a lab rat. Later, the group sits down to eat, but Takeru can't focus as his eyes have been fried up by the electric attack. When he eventually takes a bite, he starts complimenting on how tasty it is, making Haruko smile. The group later realizes they're late for school, so they quickly get dressed and rush out of the door. Himekami complains that running is unnecessary, but Haruko insists it's her duty to make sure everyone's on time. When they finally arrive at the school gate, Principal Minori is standing watch like a guard dog. The three girls barely manage to squeeze through before the gate closes, but Takeru isn't so lucky and gets left outside. The principal simply tells him to figure it out himself, but Himekami uses her spirit to lift him over the gate. This leaves Takeru confused, so Haruko explains that Himekami's power allows her to move things without using any mechane. Soon after, they bump into Takaki, the student council president and also a well-known model. She scolds Haruko, who's the vice president, for being late, and asks who this miserable-looking guy is. Haruko introduces Takeru as her childhood friend, which catches Takaki off guard. But the moment turns chaotic when a gust of wind lifts her skirt, revealing her bare print underwear. The girls think it's cute and begin teasing her for it, so a flustered Takaki bolts out of there in embarrassment. Inside the classroom, the teacher greets the students, and rumors immediately begin flying about Takeru, especially about Inoho possibly being his fiancée. Their homeroom teacher, Tamika, introduces herself and tries to start the class when the scantily dressed principal arrives to flaunt her plots. However, Tamika is having none of it, and she dives straight into the lesson, clearly annoying the principal. Soon after, the girls are sent to the hallway for their physical checkup. As Inoho walks off, she waves to Takeru, which catches the attention of every jealous simp in the room. Unable to resist temptation, Takeru and another student fake stomachaches to escape to the bathroom. Their real destination is the tree behind the infirmary, the perfect vantage point to spy on the girls' medical checkup. The two climb up, only to find they had the same dumb plan. But just as they start rating the girls' figures, Himekami appears above them like a silent ninja. She kicks them both out of the tree, telling them to stop creeping and maybe try proving their worth in other ways. After the boys apologize and run away from there, Himekami's spirit asks her why she didn't punish Takeru any further. She responds that the rage she felt during her first meeting with Takeru is strangely gone now, almost like he's not worth the emotional energy. Later, during the boys' checkup, Takeru finds himself distracted by how good-looking the nurse Aki is. But things get weird when the machine checking for Maken compatibility, called Kurono, can't find any match for him. The doctor is stunned, as this is extremely rare and only happens once in a blue moon. She forces his hand inside the machine and thrusts it forcefully, causing her plots to bounce against him. Later, Haruko reaches the principal's office, and is also shocked when she hears the results. She questions if Takeru's really that worthless to not have any Maken at all. A flashback shows Inoho and Takeru sitting on a bench, talking about how he plans to survive an entire month without any Maken. Since all the students have to join a club, Inoho promises to protect him and join whatever club he picks. Takeru then asks why she claimed to be his fiancée, but the question offends Inoho and she says the reason is tied to a memory he hasn't discovered yet. Back in the present, the creator of the machine Gen and the doctor discuss the test again. It turns out Takeru isn't the only one without a detectable Maken. 3 others also have this issue. One of them is Inoho, but since she already has a Maken, her case is different. When Takeru asks why Maken matters so much, Principal Minori explains that students rely on them not only for combat but for everyday school life. Without one, Takeru is as defenseless as a piñata at a kid's birthday party. Haruko then brings up the battle system at the school, but Inoho assures him that fights only happen when both parties agree. Takeru admits he doesn't want to fight girls, but Minori warns that some of them are stronger than they look. This makes Takeru question if the school is even safe, and Haruko reminds him that he enrolled without much research. Inoho nonetheless vows to protect him like a loyal bodyguard. Later that day, Principal Minori and Gen have a private conversation about Takeru. They realize that he's the sensei's son, as he looks and acts a lot like him. They also wonder if his powers might be linked to a legendary sealed Maken named Yamata. Takeru eventually asks Haruko to show him and Inoho around the school to help them pick a club. As they explore, he sees just how heavily these clubs rely on Maken. Students are pulling off wild moves, like jumping from tall places and using extreme power, frightening the life out of Takeru. At one point, a volleyball almost nails him, but Inoho steps in like a bodyguard and swats it away. Takeru checks out all the options and finally decides he wants to join the photography club, which instantly raises Haruko's suspicions. The idea of Takeru and Inoho in a photo club sounds less like a school activity and more like an OnlyFans trap. She starts having wild imaginations of the two clicking explicit pictures, so she grabs Takeru by the collar and orders him to join the Kenkebu club instead. Later, Haruko is out on a sweaty jog, thinking about the chat she had with Takeru the day before. He asked what the Kenkebu club was, and she explained it's basically Tenbi Academy's version of a campus patrol, where she's the big boss and Himekami is on the team. Inoho overhears and says she'll join too if Takeru does, as she can't live without him. After finishing her run, Haruko gets home and heads to the shower. wondering if Takeru will agree to join the club. When she steps out to grab shampoo, she bumps into Takeru casually brushing his teeth. He loses control upon seeing her curves, and Haruko furiously throws the shampoo bottle at the pervert. At school later, Inoho checks on Takeru, who brushes off the shampoo incident like it's his daily bread and butter. Takeru wants to know more about the Kenkebu Club before deciding if he'll join, so Haruko breaks it down. The Kenkebu Club is the disciplinary team that keeps the peace and makes sure school life doesn't get too crazy, especially now that both boys and girls are merged together. While they're talking, a first-year guy named Kengo pops out of nowhere, saying he understands everything Haruko explained and introduces himself with a handshake. Takeru immediately recognizes him as the creep who was spying on the girls with him. He assumes Kengo is about to do something shady to Haruko, and tries to push him away, but ends up grabbing her plots instead. This act doesn't go unnoticed, so another girl named Aruchi punches Takeru and threatens to teach him a lesson, but Haruko clears things up, saying it was just a mistake. Himekami, meanwhile, is chilling on a tree when she overhears talk about a fight going down in the schoolyard. She heads over and learns it's Azuki facing off against a macho guy named Kariga, who's obsessed with her. He says that once he beats the life out of her, she has to be his wife, while Azuki wants him to stop bugging her if she wins. The fight soon begins with Himekami acting as referee, but Azuki refuses to use her Makin, saying she can win without it. Kariga throws some punches, but Azuki dodges most of them with a powerful kick, though her moves don't faze Kariga's tough body much. He punches back so hard that it tears half of Azuki's clothes, almost revealing her curves. Watching the fight makes Takeru nervous because Azuki looks like she's struggling without her Makin, but Haruko reassures him that she's tougher than she seems. As Kariga starts landing more punches, Takeru tries to jump in but is quickly stopped by the other girls, who remind him that interfering in school fights is a no-go. Suddenly, Takeru feels a weird electric shock in his body and his heart races. When Azuki stumbles because of a leg injury, he leaps in to block one of Kariga's punches, but gets swatted away like a fly. That gives Azuki the opening she needs, and she finally uses her Makin to knock Kariga out cold. But in the process, her underwear flies away and falls directly on Kariga's face, making him the actual winner. Azuki isn't happy about Takeru meddling, and Haruko scolds him for breaking the rules since fighting without a Makin is dangerous. But Inoho praises him for taking Kariga's punch without breaking in half. Takeru says he jumped in to keep the fight fair, which fits with Kenkebu Club's goal of stopping unfair battles. Later at the club, Takeru, Inoho, and Kengo all say they want in, with Takeru pointing out his main goal is to prevent unfair fights. At the club's welcome event, held at a surprisingly fancy hot spring, Takeru and Kengo can't help but stare at all the girls in their swimsuits. But when Himekami catches them staring and warns she might clean their eyes, they quickly pretend to look away. The club members are introduced one by one, followed by the new recruits Inoho, Takeru, and Kengo. They then meet their advisor, the school nurse, who has the face of an angel but the figure of an OnlyFans model. The simp Takeru can't stop staring at her, so Haruko yanks his ear and warns him to close his eyes. Soon after, a second-year student named Chacha throws a massive shuriken to retrieve a stuck volleyball, but it ends up knocking Takeru and Kengo into the water instead. Later, as everyone enjoys the hot spring, Himekami angrily removes the padding from Haruko's swimsuit, revealing that her chest enhancement is fake. She teases Haruko about trying too hard to impress Takeru, and suggests a massage to make it bigger. She then starts doing it in front of everyone, and another girl named Kimi also starts massaging the teacher's massive plots. The sight almost makes the boys explode in excitement, but then a freaking bear suddenly shows up from the mountain and scares everyone. The group debates whether to catch or knock out the bear, but Chacha suggests scaring it away without harm, using a wooden plank as a weapon. The bear goes straight after the simps, but Himekami and Azuki toss them into the air to safety, while the teacher catches them using her airbags. The bear keeps coming back, so Chacha uses her Makin to extend the stick like a seesaw, tripping the bear. Kimi then creates a giant balloon with her Makin, cushioning the bear's fall. After successfully scaring the bear off without hurting it, the group celebrates, and the president officially welcomes the newcomers to the club. The next day, training begins, and the boys are made to run several rounds around the campus. They obviously fail to keep up, so Chacha appears from behind and hurls a shuriken at them, forcing them to bolt like they've just seen their ex-girlfriends. Later at class, the club president Takaki explains that a Makin is essentially a weapon, but with unique individual limits, and that most of the ones in use are just replicas. While everyone else listens politely, Takeru and Kengo have already dozed off mid-lesson. Takaki launches 2 pens directly at their heads, and warns them that continued laziness might get them kicked out of the club entirely. As punishment, she demands they go run another 50 laps around the school. To help the boys regain focus, Himekami later leads the group through a meditation session. She explains that mental training is just as important, especially for creeps like Takeru and Kengo, whose thoughts often wander into not-so-pure territory. She instructs everyone to clear their minds and remain calm. At first, both boys manage surprisingly well. Takeru mentions that for once his brain isn't full of nonsense, while Kengo tries hard to look serious and impress Himekami. But just as they start doing well, the human airbag Aki walks in and casually says that to truly meditate, they must embrace what's in their hearts. This tiny bit of encouragement is all it takes to destroy everything. Takeru and Kengo immediately start envisioning themselves on top of Aki, so Himekami zaps both of them as punishment. That night, Takeru is lying flat on the ground like a man who has just trekked Mount Kilimanjaro. Haruko calls him a weak loser and says he used to be much tougher in the past, but Takeru insists every part of his body hurts. Inoha kindly offers to massage him, and as she starts rubbing his legs, the creep Takeru says it feels amazing. She then climbs on top of him and starts rubbing his shoulders, making him praise her even more. This enrages Haruko so much that she also decides to massage Takeru, but with more aggression than care. Takeru gasps in pain, but he's forced to declare that Haruko's massage is even better. Meanwhile, Himekami silently observes them from afar and notes that she can't sense any power from Takeru, making her more suspicious about who he really is and whether he could be a threat. Out of nowhere, Himekami enters the room and grabs one of Takeru's legs, declaring that she learned the best massage technique from Bangkok. She also tells him that since tomorrow is the weekend, he has to come with her. When Takeru hesitates, she presses harder on his leg until he nervously agrees. The next day, Takeru is waiting for Himekami, wondering why she even invited him out. Haruko, Inoho, and Kengo are also behind the bushes, trying to figure out what's really going on. Himekami eventually shows up in an elegant dress and the simp Takeru can't take his eyes off of her. He quickly blurts out that she looks great, but she reveals that she has only invited him to carry her shopping bags like her personal mule. Inside the mall, Himekami drags him into store after store, and the poor guy is made to carry a mountain of bags. When he asks if they're almost done, she calls him an incompetent man for already being exhausted after carrying only a few bags. Haruko and the others, who are still in stealth mode, are shocked when they notice the two heading towards a lingerie shop. Takeru hesitates at the entrance, but Himekami urges him to follow her like a loyal puppy. She then holds up two chest wares and asks which one he prefers. Takeru uses his simp imagination to picture her in both of them, and ultimately says they're both nice. She then goes inside the changing room, warning him not to peek. Outside the fitting room, a large crowd starts to gather. Takeru, overwhelmed with bags and unable to keep his balance, stumbles forward and crashes directly into the changing room. Catching a full view of Himekami mid-change, she electrocutes him immediately, and they leave the store with Takeru's face bandaged like a mummy. They then end up at a maid cafe, where one of the waitresses turns out to be Azuki. She is embarrassed to be seen in her maid attire and hesitates to talk, but Himekami orders some food and urges her to do her job. Later, Azumi serves them food, but silently warns Takeru to keep this a secret or else she'll rip his tongue out. The poor guy becomes so nervous that he agrees and starts chomping down his food like he just came out of hibernation. Later at a park, Himekami laughs about Azuki's maid outfit, but then remembers the actual reason she brought Takir here. She needs to check a mysterious mark on his chest, but the day has been so chaotic she nearly forgot. Suddenly, she stands in front of him and demands to see his chest. Takeru tries to protest, but Himekami jumps on him and starts pulling at his clothes. Just then, three completely random guys show up, proudly declaring themselves as members of the Himekami fan club. Without a hint of shame, they describe their pathetic lives, how they obsessively follow her everywhere, scrub the ground before she walks on it, and even sneak into stores ahead of her to make sure they're danger-free. Now convinced that Takeru is some kind of threat, they vow to protect their beloved idol, but Himekami chucks them into a pond like they're garbage bags. Seconds later, a macho guy appears, challenging her to a fight so that he can steal her combat data. Himekami dodges his attacks effortlessly, but one of them hits Takeru and tears his shirt, revealing that the strange mark on his chest is missing. Before the two can process what happened, another blast sends them flying into a lake, where they accidentally end up kissing. The macho guy thinks he's won the battle, but then Takeru comes out of the pond with Himekami in his arms, visibly angry. He kicks the attacker with immense strength, breaking his weapon and leaving everyone speechless. Himekami notices the mark has returned, and realizes that he might share the same power as her brother called the Blood Pointer. Meanwhile, Takeru lands a powerful blow onto his opponent, ripping his clothes and sending him flying in only his underpants. Once he gets back to his usual confused self, Takeru has no memory of what just happened. He wonders if he did something wrong again, but Himekami suddenly kisses him and thanks him for saving her life. This prompts Haruko and Inoho to come out of the bushes in anger, and the three begin fighting over Takeru like he's a television on a Black Friday sale. The next morning, Haruko wakes up from sleep and sees Himekami, which reminds her of the moment when Himekami kissed Takeru. Then she spots Inoho and recalls that she also kissed him. Haruko steps outside to train, but her mind is still preoccupied with these thoughts. This is when Takeru appears in his lousy tracksuit and wishes her good morning. Haruko teases him about jogging so early, and Takeru explains that after yesterday's incident, he can't use his powers and has no memory of what happened. He admits he's not very familiar with Makin, but feels he should have powers to protect himself and those around him. Haruko, assuming he's talking about Himekami, gets upset and starts to leave. Takeru calls her Haru, a corny nickname from their childhood friendship, but she doesn't stop. At school, Takeru opens his lunchbox to find only green peas, which he hates with passion. He confronts Haruko about it, but she says she packed green peas so he can become stronger and protect others. Takeru complains it's too much, so a furious Haruko tells him to make his own lunch if he doesn't like it. As she walks away, Takeru tries to stop her, but ends up slipping and pulling her skirt down in front of everyone. He insists it was an accident, but Orochi suddenly arrives and punches him, calling him a freak. Poor Takeru grabs his broken jaw and tells Haruko he didn't mean to do it, but she storms out of the room. Later, Haruko sits with her lunchbox, regretting her harsh words. Takeru, meanwhile, is on the rooftop, wondering if he's actually a freak who can't control his erotic thoughts. He soon notices a massive student challenging Cha-Cha to an arm wrestling match, but she ends up not just winning but breaking the table too. Orochi then joins Takeru and explains that students challenge each other for club budgets. If they lose, they must accept their allocated budget without further argument. She adds that all club members are meeting, except for her and Takeru, as it's tough for new students to participate in budget negotiations. Nonetheless, they force themselves into the meeting like uninvited guests to a wedding. Takaki talks about strange incidents at school where students were injured and lost their memories. They suspect it's not battle-related and order Takeru and Orochi to gather information while staying in contact. Outside, Orochi bluntly tells Takeru she hates him, noting they're in different clubs, but they must work together for this mission. When Takeru tries to shake her hand, she slaps it away, telling him not to call her by her first name. At the manga club, Haruko and Kimi are trying their best to reduce the club's budget, but Kengo passionately defends manga, saying it's not just Japan's but the world's culture, ultimately convincing Haruko to keep their budget unchanged. Meanwhile, Arachi is doing some research using the student handbook, but Takeru's stomach growls loudly like a tiger, annoying her. She gives him sandwiches and he thanks her, calling her kind. However, Arachi shows her hatred toward him by wiping her hands rudely after handing him the food. She then recalls meeting Haruko, who helped her when her food spilled and protected her from mean boys, forming a close bond. And when Arachi joined the Tenbi Academy, she immediately joined the Kenkebu Club to be with Haruko. Takeru suddenly chokes on his food and asks for juice, but a furious Arachi gives him a spinning kick and tells him to get water. Later, while Takeru gulps down water like a thirsty gazelle, a girl approaches, asking if he's from Kenkebu and wants to talk about the culprits behind the student injuries. Takeru introduces himself by his full name, but as soon as he does so, the girl uses her Makin power, trapping him in spider web-like threads. Takeru tries his best to break free, but can't move an inch. Just then, Orochi shows up and attacks her, accusing her of injuring students, but the girl dodges effortlessly. Orochi's power grows stronger with each elemental use, and Takeru is genuinely impressed. He tries to cheer her up but stupidly blurts out her full name, giving the girl the chance to cast out her spell and trap Orochi as well. The girl then reveals that she's targeting the higher members of the Kenkebu Club, so she can become popular. Takeru tries calling for help, but Orochi stops him, insisting they handle it themselves. He then resorts to Plan B and throws his Nokia phone at the girl, hoping it will finish her off, but she shockingly manages to break it in half. Just when the girl prepares her Makin for another strike, Haruko shows up like a final boss. She's immediately trapped in a similar web, but doesn't worry too much about it. Haruko asks the girl why she's doing this, and the latter explains that she wants to fight the top dogs, who ignored her battle requests, so she orchestrated this to lure them. Furious, Haruko goes full beast mode and brings out her Makin for the first time. She forges a giant sword and destroys the girl's elemental attacks in one go. The girl still doesn't back down and challenges Haruko to a sword fight, but Haruko says her sword only activates against strong opponents, not against a weakling like her. She then easily breaks the girl's Makin key and knocks her lights out with a powerful strike. Once freed from the web, Orochi hugs Haruko and apologizes for not getting the job done. Takeru also asks for forgiveness for his earlier words, and to Orochi for not helping, but she says he followed her orders so it's fine. Takeru praises Haruko's fight and says he wants to learn from her on how to control his Makin. He then runs towards her in excitement, but slips on a phone and lands straight on top of Haruko, kissing her accidentally. 8 years ago, Inaho is training alone in the pouring rain while Takeru watches on like a creep from nearby. He casually warns her that she might catch a cold, but she shrugs it off, saying it doesn't bother her. In the present, Inaho thinks about those moments, remembering how she first met Takeru during the rainy season. While walking with Takeru to class, she brings up the rainy day and asks if he remembers it, but he doesn't, which makes her upset. Inaho then walks off without saying much, and Takeru wonders why in God's name she's acting like this. Inside the gym, Principal Minori begins a lesson with a crystal containing a swirling dark fog, which represents their elemental energy. She tells the students that while removing the fog is easy, controlling it is much harder. Their task is to focus and gather the fog in the center of the crystal. Takeru manages to do it quite easily, which impresses Inaho and she starts rizzing him up. Orochi also joins in and says Haruko would probably be able to control the fog in one try, and Takeru agrees, noting how strong her hands are. Kengo changes the subject and asks about the recent attack on students. Takeru explains that the attacker couldn't remember anything afterward, as if a third party had erased her memory, just like the victims. Minori overhears them chatting and scolds them for ruining the peace of her class. She challenges Takeru, asking if he wants her to demonstrate what real elemental control looks like, suggesting it's even more valuable than Makin. The coward doesn't want any trouble, but Minori decides to do it anyway and calls on Kuriga to spar with her. The macho giant confidently boasts his steel ability, which makes his body as rigid as a construction rod, but Minori mocks him for talking too much. She then shows off her elemental control and tells the class this is the kind of strength they should aim for, with or without Makin. In a flash, she punches Kuriga so hard he is flung out of the room like a baseball home run, but seconds later he returns without any injuries, and all the impressed Soft girls surround his sweaty body. Later, Haruko asks Takeru for a favor since she's busy with student council duties. She gives him a list and some money and asks him to go shopping for dinner supplies. As Takeru sets off, another flashback plays, showing young Inaho playing on a swing. Hikaru is nearby as always, and she jumps off in a rather unconventional fashion to show off. The simp is impressed by her ability to jump as if it's a big deal and congratulates her. In the present, Inaho still remembers that moment like it was yesterday. When Takeru arrives and mentions Haruko sent him to shop, he invites Inaho to tag along. They then shop together, picking up all sorts of snacks as if they're preparing for another pandemic. As they walk back, Takeru thanks her for helping and says it was a good decision to bring her. But she gets emotional and remembers their first meeting, where he introduced himself as Takeru, and she told him her name. Suddenly, Takeru stops walking and admits he was holding something before they started shopping. He says he can't take it anymore and wants to do it right now. Inaho gets excited, believing he's about to confess something romantic. But the pathetic loser simply hands her the bags and bolts off to relieve himself in the bushes. The two later sit together on a bench as it continues to rain. Inaho mentions that the rain reminds her of something important tied to him, hinting at a promise from long ago. But the buffoon Takeru still doesn't get it even after she tries dropping clues about their first meeting. She grows frustrated and decides not to tell him anymore, saying it's pointless if only she remembers it. Seeing her almost crying, Takeru promises to try and remember and offers to walk her home as the rain is getting worse. But she insists on staying alone, so he reluctantly walks away from there. Now alone, Inaho wishes Takeru could remember the promise that meant so much to her. She then leaves her umbrella and begins walking towards a hill in the pouring rain. Kengo happens to pass by and he spots her, but they don't interact. Back at school, Haruko gives Takeru a good old-fashioned scolding for leaving Inaho by herself. Even Himekami tells him to man up and look after his friends, so Takeru sets out to find her. He runs into Kengo and learns that Inaho was heading towards a hill, with tears in her eyes. Kengo assumes that Takeru did something to hurt her, so he punches the loser hard in the face. He swings his hand again, but Takeru pushes him aside and rushes off to find Inaho. After the scuffle, Himekami picks up Kengo's parcel which he had dropped and commends him for finally becoming a man. But as soon as the parcel rips open and reveals a cultured comic, Himekami loses it and beats him up to a pulp. Meanwhile, Takeru follows the path Kengo described, thinking about Inaho's words and the promise he forgot. He quietly apologizes for forgetting something so important and keeps running toward the hill. Up there, Inaho picks up a stray cat and tries to keep it warm in the cold rain. But as soon as she hears Takeru calling out, the cat freaks out and runs away. A massive rock comes rolling down the hill and is about to crush it, but Takeru shows up and uses his elemental power to save the cat. More rocks begin to tumble down, but this time Inaho appears and smashes them like they're ceramic plates. A final flashback shows young Takeru comforting a crying Inaho by repeatedly hitting his head against a tree, trying to make her laugh. He says his head is strong and won't break. His clownish performance works, and she finally stops crying. Then, they make a promise. Inaho tells him that when they grow up, she'll be his wife, and he says he'll become strong to protect her. In the present, Takeru carries both Inaho and the cat home as handling baggage is the only thing he's good at. He apologizes for forgetting the promise but tells her he'll do his best to remember, asking her to wait a little longer. Takeru then repeats his childhood vow to become strong enough to protect her, and this finally makes Inaho smile. When they reach home, Himekami becomes smitten by the cat, which they name Munji. The girls later have a long gossip session in the shower, while a soaked Takeru waits for his turn outside. The following day, an OG squad called Venus is assembled by their charismatic leader Akaya, who happens to be a graduate from the first batch of 10B Academy. A chopper soon arrives and all of them head towards 10B Academy for an unknown but important mission. Meanwhile, teacher Jen is out looking for Takeru, and soon finds him in a bruised state, being dragged inside by Hirako. It turns out the simp landed himself in trouble again when he tried to break up a fight between two girls but accidentally grabbed both of their plots.
Nice.
By the time Hirako arrived, the girls were gone, and Takeru looked like he got hit by a truck. Jen brings out a tiny wooden box and claims Takeru's Makin is hidden inside it. But before they can discuss further, a loud helicopter noise interrupts everything. Jen realizes who's arrived and immediately runs off, leaving the others confused. After the chopper lands on school grounds, the Venus team led by Akaya heads straight to the principal's office. Thinking he's the main character, Akaya starts complimenting Minori on how beautiful she has become, but she slams the door in his face and demands to know what he wants. Akaya starts off by explaining that these girls are exchange students, and they are from the Venus team. He then reveals that his clan Kamigari suspects someone at 10B is trying to revive Yamato Orichi, an ancient figure. Minori laughs it off like it's just a myth, but Akaya is serious. Kamigari is basically a secret group that uses Makin and elemental powers to keep the country stable, and they're not taking this lightly. Akaya then starts giving a history lesson, saying back in the day, gods ruled everything, but Kamigari formed to oppose that. Recently, strange stuff has been happening at the nearby hill, and they suspect something nefarious going on there. Akaya's promotion depends on finding out who's behind it, so he's hell-bent on getting it done. Just then, Jen walks in with the other teachers, and they're all pissed to see Akaya, their old teammate. He tells them to chill as he's just a temporary teacher, and isn't here to start trouble. Takaki and a few others show up too, and Akaya immediately recognizes her as the student council president. Seeing his dashing appearance, her hormones kick in, and she agrees to take him to meet the Kenkibu Club. Once everyone is gathered, Minori reveals that Akaya is one of the original Makan-ki members. His current group, called Venus, will be here at 10B Academy to find out who the rat is. Then, the introduction Distractions begin, and the first two members of the Venus group are twins Real and Ariru. Next is a scary-looking woman named Dimitra, and then pop idol Syria, who has the biggest plots in the room. Finally, there's Yan, who doesn't even think introductions are necessary, and says they should just start with their investigation. Dimitra brags that Venus only takes on dangerous missions, the kind that Make and Key wouldn't survive. Yan agrees and says, most people can't even comprehend what a real fight looks like. This riles up Azuki, and she gets ready to fight as usual, but Yuka steps in and suggests settling it with a sports match instead. Out on the playground, Yuka explains the rules for speed volleyball. It's 3 versus 3, and the first team to reach 15 points wins. Aki and her massive airbags are going to officiate the game to make it fair. The game soon begins and Azuki serves, but Yan immediately uses her element and smashes the ball so hard it knocks Haruko over. This pisses off the Mach and Key team, as they were under the impression they couldn't use any powers. But now that Haruko is fired up, she declares that she won't lose at any cost. The next to serve is Syria, who's for some reason flirting with the human punch bag Takeru. The game heats up fast and both teams showcase insane abilities, tying the game at 14 each. Now the next team to score 2 points wins the game. A flashback to a few hours ago reveals that the stakes are very high. If Venus loses, they have to join Make and Key. But if Make and Key loses, they're suspended for a whole semester. Yan had agreed without hesitation, clearly confident they'd win. Back in the match, Akaya reveals that this is probably the first time Venus has faced opponents on their level. And honestly, they're loving the challenge. Yan slams the ball again, this time using enough power to blast it into the ceiling. Debris falls everywhere, and Azuki is furious that they played dirty to win a point. Syria then takes the next serve and uses all her magic to add weight to the ball. But just when it looks like the game's over, Haruko leaps like a kangaroo and saves it in the nick of time. With the ball back in the air, Cha-Cha uses her power to enlarge the ball, and then Azuki kicks it with the force of 1,000 horsepower. The ball lands straight into Yan and smashes her into a wall, tying the game once again. Furious, Dimitra activates her power and summons a flood of ocean water right there on the court. Haruko also brings out her sword and clashes with her head-on. Their energy bursts make the ball go wild, and it expands with unlimited power. Just when it's about to explode, Takeru runs in to protect Haruko from harm. The ball then explodes, creating a large hole in the building and ending the match once and for all. Most of the students have their clothes torn off, but they're all fine. However, when Takeru checks on Haruko, he's shocked to realize he's accidentally landed on Syria. She blushes and hugs him, calling him her hero, while the rest of the girls watch in anger. Meanwhile, Azuki asks who won, but Aki says what really matters is that both teams got to know each other's strength. They all then line up for a group photo, and Akaya tries to strike a cool pose but ends up embarrassing himself in front of everyone. The next day in class, Syria is introduced as a new exchange student who'll be staying until summer break. As soon as she walks in, the whole class freaks out, recognizing her as a super popular idol. But Kengo still believes Himekami is more beautiful, despite being as flat as a pancake. Syria suddenly snaps a photo of Takeru and hugs him tightly, saying she's finally found him and that it must be fate they're in the same class. Inako cuts in and yells that Takeru is her fiancé, but Syria clings tighter to him, saying she'll just make him her boyfriend then. This causes Inako to burst into tears, while the Rizless boys in the class get fired up, shouting that Takeru's stealing all the gravy. They eventually beat him up in front of the class to teach him a lesson. Meanwhile, the girls are crowded around the twins, calling them adorable and asking what they're working on. They explain they're knitting scarves for the winter, because apparently they don't wear ready-made clothes. In the kitchen, Dimitra is slicing vegetables like a pro, which impresses Haruko. She jokes that she's great at both fighting and cooking, but Dimitra clarifies that she's only good at cutting stuff, not cooking. At the medical room, a bruised Takeru is getting his face checked up by Aki. As it turns out, he grabbed someone yet again. As she looks for bandages, Takeru stares at her rear side like a creep and takes in the glory. Aki tries to reach a high self, but she loses balance and ends up falling right on top of Takeru. Later, Syria tells her friends that she likes the ugly loser Takeru. Yan is shocked that Syria is actually talking about love, but she says Takeru is kind and their meeting felt like fate. Dimitra agrees, saying love can happen anytime, anywhere, and encourages her to do what she wants before they get orders from their captain. The others also support her and start researching about Takeru. They learn that he's from class 1B, and that he apparently likes girls with big mountains. Syria gets excited since she exactly fits the type. They also learn that Takeru is surrounded by 3 girls: Inaho, his classmate who says she's his fiancée, Haruko, his childhood friend, and Himekami, who once went on a date with him. Dimitra warns that these 3 could get in the way of Syria's date, so they decide to remove them for good. Back at school, a frustrated Kengo vents to Takeru that he hasn't clapped any cheeks, even after 2 months at 10B Academy. But this is when Takeru finds a letter from someone on his desk, which he quickly hides. Kengo is jealous of his friend for having not 1 but 3 girlfriends who are willing to make him explode with joy anytime he wants. Later in the bathroom, Takeru reads the letter, which is a love confession, asking to meet at the parking lot after class. Kengo happens to be overhearing from the other stall, and he immediately spills the news news to Haruko, making her nervous. Soon after, Takaki approaches them and reports that a pile of trash has been discovered near the clock tower, which needs immediate investigation. Kengo begs to be paired with Himakami, but she zaps him without hesitation. After class, Inaho starts looking for Takeru, but realizes he's already gone. She soon finds several bags of snacks left on the ground, which she picks up with excitement. Inaho then spots Takeru's mannequin near a tree, and the dumb girl mistakes it for the real person. She hugs it tightly and thanks it for all these treats. The twins, meanwhile, observe from nearby and are shocked how easy it was to fool Inaho. Takeru waits in the parking lot, thinking it might be a prank, but Syria shows up and reveals she wrote the letter. He gets shocked and asks what she wants, to which Syria simply grabs his hand and leads him away. They go out for some old-fashioned ice cream and juice, and Syria talks about how nice it is to be free from fans. She says meeting Takeru makes her happy, then leads him to a creepy house. Syria mentions that she wants to have fun with him, so the excited weirdo enters without hesitation. But as soon as he sits on a chair, he gets trapped, and Syria, now dressed up, tells him to get ready. Back at the clock tower, Haruko and Himakami realize the trash was a setup. This is when Yan creeps up from behind and admits that she and her team are behind all of this. A concerned Inaho also arrives there with the dummy, saying Takeru has stopped speaking. But the other girls quickly make her understand that she's the dummy who can't even differentiate between a human and a doll. Just when the situation starts to get tense, Himakami's spirit manages to steal a paper from Yan that exposes where Takeru is being kept. Demetra also arrives at the scene and tries to stop them from leaving, but the girls knock her aside and run away. They soon reach the creepy house and try entering through the front door, but it's locked shut. Inaho thus uses her magic to blow the entire place up, only to find Takeru strapped to a chair while Syria is forcing him to listen to her songs. He's clearly not into it, but just sits there and takes. Later that night at home, Haruko admits she might have overreacted, but Himakami warns that Syria is still after Takeru, so she's a threat. The next day, Kengo and Takeru set up a ladder while chatting about doing something exciting. Kengo reminds Takeru that the real reason they came to Tenbi Academy wasn't to learn about Makien or train with elements, but to enjoy their youth and drink hormone gravy. Takeru nods in agreement, declaring that no matter where their goals may take them, they won't back down until they reach their own version of paradise. 3 days earlier, Kengo gathers several desperate boys like him for a secret meeting and says they have been through a lot of injustice. He riles them up and urges them to unite in pursuit of their desires. Later, Kengo presents a thick stack of signed papers to Takaki, revealing they are signed petitions from all the boys in school. He then asks when swimming lessons begin, and Takaki explains that the classes for boys and girls are now scheduled on different days. Azuki sees through the ploy, and bluntly says the boys are just upset they won't get to see girls in swimsuits. Kengo argues that boys and girls shouldn't be separated, proposing combined swimming lessons. Yuka raises a valid concern, noting that since only the boys signed the petition, it might lead to dissatisfaction among the girls. But in response, Kengo reveals a new proposal named the Water Riding Battle. Takaki reads the details and actually likes it, and she's supported by Yuka as well as Demetra. In the present, the girls show up for the water riding battle, wearing the tightest swimming costumes possible. Outside, Kengo and Takeru try to peek through the second-floor windows using the same ladder, hoping to catch a glimpse of their so-called paradise. Unfortunately, the ladder doesn't quite reach, and they're left staring at the wall. This is when Kuriga arrives, knocks over the ladder and scolds them for wasting time. He warns they'll be caught by the second years if they keep messing around. However, when Takeru mentions that Azuki is also participating, Kuriga's immediately gets a nosebleed just thinking about her. Kengo then decides it's time to reveal their ultimate weapon, a boy who has the ability to make people invisible. Kuriga gets excited, but the boy clarifies that he can only make bodies invisible, not presence or sound. Kuriga immediately loses interest and storms off, calling them useless freaks. Takeru also realizes that they'll be caught anyway, so the two abandon the project and decide it's time for a more dangerous approach. At the pool, Yuka explains the rules to everyone. If the boys win, swimming classes will be combined, but if the girls win, they stay separated. The battle includes first and second year students, as well as a few teachers, with 6 boys and 6 girls competing. Losing your headband or falling into the water means instant elimination, and the last one standing wins it for their team. Yuka then wishes everyone luck, although Takaki clearly only cheers for Akaya and turns red when he smiles back. A quick flashback shows Kengo assigning matchups. Takeru is supposed to go after Inaho, with the logic that she won't be aggressive toward him. In the present, Takeru approaches Inaho and tries to grab her ribbon but gets smacked away. Takeru realizes Kengo's genius plan has already failed, so he resorts to the backup strategy. He then whispers something that makes Inaho blush and lose focus, giving him the perfect chance to snatch her ribbon. After Inaho is eliminated, she begins crying and reveals that Takeru called her fat. Everyone is horrified, and even Kengo joins in to call Takeru a monster. As the battle continues, Himakami is targeted by her desperate fan club members, but she sends her spirit to attack them invisibly. Even while getting thrashed, they praise her beauty, despite what they call the smallest plots in school. A furious Himakami attacks them with her electric powers and eliminates them. But before she can celebrate, Kengo sneaks up behind her and takes her headband, sending her out of the game as well. Haruko tries to take Takeru's headband, but he dodges and accidentally grabs her airbags instead. The entire pool freezes in disbelief, and she sends him flying with a punch, but his friends save him. To everyone's surprise, Takeru actually managed to snatch Haruko's headband mid-punch, revealing that it was all part of the plan. The battle becomes more intense, and contestants like Azuki, Kuriga, Akaya and Aki are all eliminated one after another. This leaves only Takeru, Kengo, and Syria as the final three. A desperate Kengo gives up on the plan and charges directly at Syria, but she knocks him aside like a fly. He reveals he had secretly undone her swimsuit, only to find she's wearing another underneath. Soon after, the final showdown begins between Syria and Takeru. She announces she'll go all out, terrifying Takeru so much he almost pollutes the swimming pool. She then signals Dimitra to create a massive wave, and the two charge towards Takeru at full speed. But just as they're about to strike, they notice that their final team member Minerva has arrived outside. This causes them to suddenly stop, and Syria ends up crashing into Takeru. He takes full advantage of the opportunity, and removes Syria's headband, eliminating her and earning his team the victory. The boys are ecstatic, and they lift him into the air as if he's just won a war all by himself. Dimitra, meanwhile, says the final member has arrived, so they now must complete their mission. The day of combined swimming classes finally arrives, and Takeru and Kengo stand proudly, convinced their efforts have paid off. But when they reach the pool, all the girls are nowhere to be seen. It turns out the invisible boy has used his powers to hide all of them from the creepy guys. A few weeks later, summer arrives and Takeru and Kengo are resting under a tree, both clearly drained by the heat. Minerva silently observes them from a window above, and when Takeru notices her, he nudges Kengo and points out the beautiful silver-haired girl watching them. The simp excitedly checks his list of girls at Tenbi Academy, but finds no match, leaving him baffled. Meanwhile, Himekami, Haruko, and Inaho are licking some ice creams to take a breather from the scorching heat. Haruko is reminded of a fond childhood memory when she used to share ice cream with Takeru. But their moment is interrupted when Takaki arrives to inform them that a new Venus member has enrolled at Tenbi. She asks Haruko to welcome the newcomer, but before anyone can respond, the girl herself appears, introducing herself as Minerva. Everyone is shocked by how quickly she reached them, and they confirm that she is indeed the final member of Venus. She politely greets the Makanki members, then unexpectedly jumps from the window. Haruko panics, but Minerva safely lands using teleportation, impressing the girls who call her cool. Takeru and Kengo, on the other hand, are still searching the campus for the silver-haired girl, but fail to find her. Suddenly, they hear an argument nearby. A proud and overbearing girl is picking a fight with a fellow student, clearly provoking him on purpose. She briefly uses her Makine to give the boy a sharp headache and demands an apology, but he refuses and challenges her to a proper battle, asking Takeru to serve as referee. Takeru reluctantly agrees, but he sends Kengo to fetch Kenkibu while he manages the situation. The fight soon begins with the boy pulling the girl toward him and forming a barrier. She counters by turning into smoke and vanishing, then summons a doll that looks like the boy. This freezes him on the spot, shocking Takeru. The girl's older brother then appears and casually explains her ability. She can create and control dolls of the people who are within her make-in space. She then ruthlessly breaks the doll's arm, causing the boy's arm to snap as well. Just as she targets his other arm, Takeru intervenes, saying she has already won. But the annoyed girl creates a doll of Takeru and forces him to bow. He uses every ounce of strength inside his body to push forward, which shocks the girl. But then she squeezes him like a lemon and knocks him out. When Takeru awakens, he finds Minerva standing before him, having destroyed the doll. The girl demands to know who she is, but the Aura Queen Minerva calmly says the fight is over. The girl scoffs, mentioning her grandfather, the Kamigari chief, and tries to assert authority. But Akaya suddenly appears, reprimanding her for going too far. She brushes it off as a prank and tells Akaya to focus on his tasks, hinting at her connection with Venus. She then leaves after threatening to report them to her grandfather. Back at the student council office, Takaki scolds Takeru for flunking the element exam, which is essential for using a Makan. It's the first time a Makan key member has failed this test, meaning he's the academy's biggest loser ever. Later, a worried Takeru shares with his friends that if he fails the next exam, he'll be kicked out of the club. Kengo tries to lighten the mood, but Inaho becomes emotional, insisting she wants to stay with Takeru forever. Just then, Minerva arrives and asks if something is wrong. Kengo realizes she's the silver-haired girl he saw earlier and is frustrated that Takeru has already met her. They explain Takeru's situation, and Inaho notes that the next exam is after school tomorrow. Himekami warns that learning to control elements in one day is nearly impossible, but Minerva suggests they do a training camp to help him. At Takeru's house, Kengo freaks out upon learning that he lives with Inaho, Haruko, and Himekami. Minerva jokingly compares the setup to a harem, where 3 beautiful girls are chasing a loser boy. The girls then begin to cook food and gossip, while the boys head outside to practice. Takeru tries his best to channel his element and hit a bottle but keeps failing. Kengo turns into a motivational speaker and urges him to dig down deep if he wants to chase his ideal future. Upon hearing this, Takeru finally focuses and creates energy in his hand, successfully hitting the bottle. His element also leaves a mark on the tree, which is the same one he occasionally gets on his chest. Himekami, meanwhile, is on her way to call the boys. When she notices a spike in elemental energy, she realizes someone's been creeping on her, and it turns out to be none other than Minerva. The two girls come face to face, and Minerva says she's impressed by Himekami's spirits, meaning she's able to see them. Elsewhere, the other Venus members question Akaya for letting Minerva act alone. He explains that Himekami holds secrets connected to Kamigari, and that Minerva's mission must continue. Back at the training ground, Himekami releases her power and asks if Minerva has seen her true form. Minerva reveals that Venus has orders to bring her to Kamigari before her existence disrupts dimensional balance. Himekami's spirits assert they'll never let that happen and launch an attack, but Minerva easily thwarts them. A furious Himekami then challenges her to a fight, but Minerva declines, saying she doesn't want violence. She then mentions that she noticed a boy with similar spiritual waves, clearly referring to Takeru. Himekami realizes this and asks if Minerva plans to take him, and she admits it's possible. The next evening, Takeru passes the element exam by knocking the bottle down. This means he'll not be kicked out of the club just yet. A few days later, teacher Jen hands Takeru his official Maken, explaining that he designed it specifically for dweebs like Takeru, who refuses to fight girls. Minori explains that Takeru's new weapon activates only in response to an opponent's Maken, as it has the ability to hijack their power. Later, while walking outside, Takeru reflects on yesterday's fight and tries to prepare himself for that possibility. At the Ken Keibu Club, Takaki calls for a meeting and announces that for the upcoming summer training camp, everyone will have to chip in with some money. This is because they have depleted all of their budget on useless snacks. The group is devastated as they have no way of earning money whatsoever. On the way back to class, they spot Minori posting some flyers about a vacancy at the maid cafe. Takeru and Himekami recognize it as the same one they had visited during their date, and the entire group decides to work there to raise money. Later, as Azuki is on her way to her part-time job, she is stunned to see the cafe surrounded by a massive crowd. Inside, all the members of the Kenkibu Club are working in their ultra-seductive costumes, which naturally draws out a large number of simps. Azuki storms into the manager's office and demands to know what's going on. The manager, who has muscles larger than her career goals, explains that the girls were so effective she had to hire them all. With more customers arriving, she urges Azuki to change into uniform and begin serving. Soon after, Takeru and Kengo also walk in, and Azuki immediately grabs Takeru, accusing him of colluding with the manager, but he awkwardly says that this was the only way to make quick money. Meanwhile, Haruko seems to be doing a splendid job charming the customers with her appearance, but she's also nervous and ends up spilling coffee and dropping a food tray. Though Haruko makes a complete mockery of herself, the customers think it's cute and don't mind at all. Annoyed by the chaos, Azuki hears a noise and rushes into the kitchen, only to find Chacha and Kimi building a ridiculous mountain of ice cream. Back in the dining area, Takeru is shocked to see his teachers walk in. Gin explains that they often come here and the manager of the store is actually their close friend. Elsewhere, the girl who can control dolls, Otohime, decides to test her latest creation. She sets her sights on Takeru and Haruko as targets. At the cafe, the girls continue working. Maruchi efficiently serves food. Himekami takes orders with a sharp tongue. Chacha plays with food combinations. Kimi does some cleaning, and Azuki struggles to balance plates while worrying about running out of food. Takeru, meanwhile, notices the manager is looking ill, and she admits she's exhausted from all the work. She thus passes the responsibilities to him before heading out. As the orders start piling up, Inaho accidentally bumps into a customer, causing her to panic. But Takeru shows up and apologizes to the customer. Before gently helping Inaho up, she is touched by his kindness and thanks him, while Haruko watches from afar with jealousy. Things go from bad to worse when Chacha jokingly lifts Haruko's shirt to tease Takeru. She thought Haruko was wearing something beneath, but ends up exposing her in front of all the customers. Chacha immediately apologizes for her mistake, but an embarrassed Haruko runs away with tears in her eyes. When she doesn't return for a while, Takeru sets out to find her. Haruko, meanwhile, sits alone, reminiscing about similar moments when Takeru saw her in awkward situations as a child. Though it used to be funny, she now finds herself wondering if she's jealous after seeing him comfort Inaho. Suddenly, a robot-like man under Otohime's control attacks her with several rounds of bullets. Haruko manages to evade the shots and tries to retaliate, but the robot easily disintegrates her Maken. He then jumps towards her to land a crushing blow, but Takeru shows up just in time and holds the robot. Otohime is watching all of this go down from her tiny room, and she's excited to see Takeru's real powers. At the mall, Haruko says that the robot can replicate Maken and is incredibly powerful. He then grabs Takeru's leg and attempts to break it as if it's KFC chicken. Takeru considers using Gen's Maken, but remembers it only works against active Makens. Knowing it won't be effective and unwilling to risk it, he backs off and is soon thrown to the ground. The robot then advances towards them, but Azuki suddenly arrives and kicks him straight to the temple, knocking him out. The teachers soon arrive and remove the robot's mask to shockingly learn that she's actually the cafe manager. Regaining consciousness, she asks if she lost control again, but Minori assures her that no one was harmed. A confused Takeru asks what's going on, so Gen explains that Kamigari once tried to take over Tenbi Academy, creating and controlling Makens to maintain power. Many people were manipulated during that time, and the cafe manager was one of the victims. Meanwhile, Otohime's brother calls the incident boring, but she disagrees, intrigued by Takeru's potential. She says she'll now pit him against someone even stronger. Soon after, her sister Kikyo arrives, and it is revealed that their grandfather is none other than the head of Kamigari. The sisters are now hell-bent on destroying Takeru, and the entire Tenbi Academy for good. A flashback is then shown where a young Haruko spots a child drowning in a river. She desperately wants to help, but can't swim, so all she can do is panic and scream. Just then, Takeru shows up and dives in, despite the fact that he can't swim either. On his way down, he hits a branch, breaks it off mid-air like some action hero, and uses it to save the child. In the present, Haruko remembers this moment clearly. Thinking it was then she realized she needed to change and become strong like Takeru. Takeru. But as she's lost in thoughts, someone follows her and abducts her. At the Kenkebu Club, Himekami tells Takeru that Haruko left early for her student council duties, but never arrived at school. Takeru knows she's not the type to ditch, so he immediately starts looking for her. Elsewhere, Otohime has made a creepy little doll replica of Haruko and is preparing to use it for control. While Takeru searches, Inaho finds him and decides now's the perfect time to glue a protection charm to his tie. She refers to the chaos from the day before, where Takeru and Haruko had nearly been caught in danger, and tells him to be careful from now on. As Takeru continues up the stairs, he's suddenly confronted by a girl who says Haruko is with them and that he needs to come alone to the top of the nearby mountain. A worried Takeru demands answers, but the girl only says she's Kikyo and faints like a dramatic lead in a soap opera. When Takeru reaches the summit, he finds Kiyo waiting for him, eager to test his power. Then a robotic bird shows up and projects Otohime's hologram. She's still bitter about how Takeru and her friends interrupted in the past, and reveals that she now has Haruko in her capacity. Next, Kiyo steps in and explains that Kamigari only values the strong and sees everyone else as slaves. Takeru says he doesn't want to fight, but she launches him across the field with a swift kick, declaring that anyone unwilling to fight can't protect their loved ones. Meanwhile, Haruko demands answers from Otohime, who explains her goal is to awaken Takeru's hidden power by triggering the same fear and rage he felt when he failed to protect his mother in the past. A flashback shows young Takeru helpless as an attacker storms their dojo and eliminates his mother. Haruko suddenly realizes that Takeru is in the same position now, as he'll be desperate to save her. At the mountain, Takeru is thrown around like a rag doll, and he crashes into a rock engraved with a symbol that matches the one on his body. As he lies there, he remembers his mother's words: "Power should only be used to protect friends, stop fights, and never for selfish reasons." With those words in his mind, his power finally erupts, and he starts emitting rays of light that beam across the mountain. The students at Tenbi Academy also witness this, and Himekami immediately sends out her spirit to investigate what's going on. Kikyo stares in shock as a massive amount of energy surrounds Takeru, wondering if he's channeling the power of the ancient beast Yamato Orochi. He soon starts levitating as the energy continues to grow, absorbing more and more from the mountain. Otohime, watching gleefully, says his anger is what's fueling it, and warns it could completely destroy his body. Himekami's spirit also reaches the mountain, just as a huge explosion ensues and Takeru comes out of it. Otohime laughs and says that Takeru might destroy Tenbi Academy himself, which would be a win for Kamigari's takeover plan. Chacha and Kimi, who are chilling on a rooftop, suddenly hear the explosions. Before they can react, a possessed Takeru shows up and attacks them. But Azuki and Himekami intervene just in time. Kengo is understandably confused about why their friend is trying to kill them, but Himekami knows that he's absorbing elemental powers like a sponge on steroids. Meanwhile, Otohime speculates that Takeru's power has been inside him since birth and might be connected to their bloodline. Haruko, however, insists that his power comes from something deeper: his pain from losing his mother and his refusal to see others suffer the way she did. Otohime is annoyed by her BS and squeezes the Haruko doll, causing her real body immense pain. She also vows to obliterate Tenbi from the map. But that's when Venus arrives in style. They immediately free Haruko, with Demetra telling her to take the escape route they've set up. A staircase then appears behind Haruko, and Minerva explains it leads straight to Tenbi. Haruko quickly thanks them before bolting, while Akaya and his team prepare to teach the spoiled brat a lesson. At the school grounds, Takeru keeps absorbing elements like his life depends on it, and Himekami warns that anyone who gets too close to him will be drained as well. Just when all hope seems to be lost, a glowing ball emerges in the sky, and Haruko emerges from it in dramatic fashion. This leaves everyone impressed, and Inaho quickly tells her to take care of Takeru. Haruko then recalls that her Makin is the only weapon capable of purging demonic energy, so she decides to use her binding elite skill to suppress Takeru's rampage. He quickly throws a ball of energy at her, but Haruko uses her sword to counter it, and manages to strike him. Takeru's energy begins flowing uncontrollably, damaging the nearby field and hurting himself in the process. Before he unalives himself, Haruko strikes again, but her blade taps the charm Inaho gave earlier and halts right before piercing him. Takeru's power flares out violently, forming a giant vortex that leads to a huge explosion. When the dust settles, Takeru slowly wakes up and finds himself face first in Haruko's airbags, leaving everyone speechless. But instead of being angry like she always is, she acts relieved and smiles. Just when the group celebrates the victory, Kikyo appears out of nowhere. She invites Takeru to join Kamigari, saying his power belongs on the battlefield. She claims Tenbi will eventually fall, but Takeru, completely uninterested, says he'll stop her no matter what. Takaki also shows up, saying she learned about Kikyo's schemes from Akaya-sensei and confirms that Makinki's purpose is to protect Tenbi. The Makinki members then ready themselves for another fight, but Kikyo realizes she's outnumbered and says Kamigari will return one day. She warns Takeru to grow stronger, then disappears dramatically into the distance. The next day, everyone's back to training. Takeru is trying to do push-ups with a massive boulder on his back, but only manages one before collapsing. Meanwhile, Aki returns to teaching. Azuki complains about rude cafe customers as usual. Himekami takes Kengo on a shopping trip and kicks him for picking the wrong clothes. And Uruchi referees a sparring match. With renewed spirit, the Makinki members declare their mission to protect Tenbi and its peace from anyone who dares to challenge it. Comment down below, Riz Lord, if you finished the video. Subscribe so you don't miss the next video.